Hey there, welcome to another one of my deep dives where we take a look at a specific topic and try and break it down. This one is all about how the balance is, in my opinion, changing and shifting when it comes to negotiation, preparation, and planning, and enabling buyers to have just as much leverage, or sometimes better leverage and better preparation than historically salespeople have had. You see, the challenge has always been that procurement was at a little bit of a disadvantage, or a major disadvantage perhaps, in terms of the amount of resources that were available to them when it came to preparing and planning for a negotiation. Salespeople typically always had better access to market intelligence. Typically, sales departments are much better resourced than procurement teams, meaning that they have the time and the resource to prepare and plan better for any commercial negotiations than procurement would have done. And I'm going to have a look today at how that game is perhaps changing a little bit more in our favor. And there are three areas where I think this is happening. So the first one is around negotiation preparation and planning tools. By that, I mean software that enables us to prepare and plan better for a negotiation. And there are the more traditional ways that you can do that by using an LLM to create perhaps a skill or an assistant or an agent that can help evaluate the relative buyer and supplier strengths and relative ease of entry for competitors, the classic Porter's Five Forces model. And also they can do things like scrape general market intelligence from the internet, but it's not going to be as good as anything that you would pay for on the market intel side. There are also tools like Ruby from Positive Purchasing that does something similar, but in a much more structured format and leverages AI as part of that prep and planning tool. But I think more importantly, it's tools like Lavinia AI that enable you to practice negotiation in an environment against an AI avatar, which means that you're not having to sort of hone your negotiation skills in a real life environment. And all of these different tools that are coming onto the market now, I think, are really giving buyers the toolkit that they previously just didn't have when it came to being able to be better prepared and better planned for a specific negotiation. Mastery obviously requires a lot of practice, the whole compounding rule that if you get 1% better at a skill every single day, that slowly compounds and compounds until you're a real expert at it. And the only way that you do that is by having regular practice and making it a habit. And having, for example, an avatar to negotiate against, or a prep and planning agent within an LLM that enables you to input the metrics and to be able to get a negotiation plan, all of that just really tips the balance a little bit more towards the buyer than it historically had been. So that's the first one. The second area where I think we're gaining an advantage now are just the sheer number of category and market intelligence tools that are out there now on the market. So historically, if you bought something like, I'm going to use non-ferrous metals as an example, because that's an area that I know personally from a category that I'd managed in the past. If you wanted to get market intelligence on non-ferrous metals, you needed to have a subscription to an industry newsletter, journal, or publication. Platts back in the day was the classic one for metals information. Software is now changing the game, and you've got tools out there now that can pull and scrape market intelligence from lots of different data sources and consolidate that into one specific software application to enable you to have that market intelligence for your specific category. And while historically that had always been more focused on direct spend, and to be honest, it probably still is, but there are more and more now market intelligence opportunities that you can get on indirect spend, specifically on areas like software, for example, and marketing spend, which is starting now to become more into the mainstream to be able to gather both market intelligence, but also intelligence from competitor deals as well. So if you're, say, a SaaS procurement software platform, you're going to have all of the market data from all of the different negotiations that went through your platform. So if you anonymize that data and make it available to all of your other customers, then that slowly over time gives you a pretty damn impressive database of, what the market rate is for a specific piece of software. And you can then benchmark a specific customer, their size, their relative negotiation power based on their industry sector, country that they're in, etc., and enable that customer to be able to get a much better result from the negotiation based on all of the data that you have within your system. So whereas historically that was much more focused on market intel for direct materials, which is obviously much easier to get from sort of various industry sources, it's trickling over now and increasingly becoming more common in indirect categories too, which is a real game changer. And then finally, number 3 is all of the different AI bots that are out there now that can do autonomous negotiations in some form or another. There are a number of them out there: Pactum, Nibble, Digiproc, a few others as well, just that don't spring into my mind off the top of my head. But all of them do a similar thing currently, and that is they focus more on automating the long tail or the non-strategic, the non-key negotiations within an organization. So this really is an arbitrage of buyers' time. So it's enabling buyers to get their time back to focus on more important negotiations, because it's allowing AI and bots to be able to undertake the more simple tactical negotiations that historically either would have taken up a lot of buyers' time or perhaps wouldn't even have been negotiated at all and would have just been managed directly through the specific stakeholder that wanted to buy something. And obviously, they're not trained negotiators, which means the supplier in that sense is pretty much always going to have the upper hand. So those types of software that are enabling these low value, not high stakes negotiations to be automated is then freeing up the time and enabling resources to be put to use for better, more strategic negotiations instead. So these 3 areas are where I think we're seeing real game-changing opportunities now to be able to level the playing field a little bit, to enable buyers to have just as much leverage and just as much market intelligence and resource and capacity to be able to tackle negotiations in the same way that sales historically have perhaps had the advantage over us. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Are there other areas where you think that procurement is gaining an upper hand or being able to claw back a little bit of the historical disadvantage? Let me know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and thanks for watching.